Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're letting everyone in the room, so bear with us. My name is Odessa Phillip, and I'm the Outreach Manager for the Druid Lake Vision Plan Project. Very excited to have you here today. Just bear with us a few minutes more as we let everyone into the room. Just as a reminder, we are recording the meeting for the purposes of our note taking so that we can pay full attention to everyone participating in the meeting this evening. So thank you again for joining us. Give us a few moments while we let everyone in the room, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Just one other reminder, if you can place your place your device on mute. We will have opportunities for participants to weigh in or have some discussion, but we just want to make sure we can minimize background noise. Thank you. And Nick, are you ready to share your screen?
Yeah. I am trying to do it right here, Odessa. Let's just see here. Okay. Am I sharing anything now?
Nope.
No? All right, let me give it another try here. I think in a pinch, we could shift to Claire here. This is a new computer. Okay.
Awesome.
Are you seeing anything?
Nope, we see you.
Okay.
No worries. That's what technology does. It always gives us a little twist.
I'm going to give it one more try here. Okay, how about now?
Yay.
Okay.
Well, we're looking at your email.
Yep. Let me do a little switcheroo here.
Now we're talking.
Okay, don't know. All right, let's see if this works. Okay, excellent. I'm going to do one annoying thing here, and okay, I think this is about as perfect as we're going to get it. Excellent. Well, should I just dive in, Odessa?
Absolutely. And don't forget to introduce yourself.
Yep. Thanks so much. I'm Nick Lace, co-founder of Unknown Studio. We're the landscape architecture and urban design studio who's been leading this project, the Druid Lake Vision Plan, together with Baltimore City Recreation and Parks. This is our third and final public meeting for the Vision Plan phase. We're super excited to share some of our Vision Plan design work with you tonight. This reflects about 9 months of work together with our sub-consultant team. We also had 3 working groups, 3 project committees, an interagency working group. We met with community advocates, as well as an executive committee. So it's really taken shape with a lot of input from different voices in order to arrive at a realizable plan that will continue to evolve. And I guess just wanted to point that out too, that this is the final community meeting of the vision plan, but the community engagement will continue as this project continues to develop. Tonight we're going to give a quick recap. You'll be hearing from Odessa from Aceto Consulting, talking about the community outreach that we've done thus far and how that has shaped the design. You'll be hearing from Claire Augrey, my partner on this, and we look forward to taking you through everything that we've done to date. One important thing, I think Odessa will say a little bit more about this on the end, but we do have an additional survey feedback. There's an opportunity to respond to a couple questions that we'll pose at the end, as well as just a chance for some of your comments that may or may not have been, have had a chance to that you have. It'll allow you to weigh in on the project further. So stay tuned for that at the end, and you can get this QR code through holding up your phone to the screen. I think we could also post this in the chat, the link to the Survey Monkey. One thing we just want to point out is that this is a long timeline project. It's we like to say it's a marathon, not a sprint project. It's a big multi-phase project. There's a lot of parallel projects happening around it. I think we've mentioned these in earlier meetings, that the tanks are currently being constructed, and those are the reason that we've been able to move forward with this recreational transformation of the lake into a park amenity. After this vision plan, so we see where we are here, this is the beginning of where we really get into the details of the design, and working through a really implementable schematic design all the way through the construction documents for what we see as a multi-phase project. This is not something that we're likely to build all at once. We are constrained in some of the logistics and how it gets built. We're also going to be likely constrained with the amount of fundraising that can happen over time to provide enough to really fulfill the vision here. And we're going to be working closely with the DPW tanks team, that's kind of shown in this red bar, as well as you all have likely heard and participated in the DOT team, the Complete Streets project, that is kind of running simultaneously with this project, and we've been working with them periodically to just get vet different design ideas, and it's been a very collaborative process throughout. Just recapping a few things here, some of the design principles that organize the work that we've presented to you early on were shaped by three large principles. The first one is really recognizing that this is a super important historic landscape. It's one of the earliest parks in the U.S., second to Central Park and Fairmount Park in Philadelphia. This is one of the oldest great public parks, and we've always sought to go big with this and to fulfill on that legacy of creating a contemporary public landscape that does justice to the historic aspects of this project. Number two, we really understood early on that this is not a build it and they will come kind of project. It's really bringing out community ideas about what the programming should be and having that proactively welcome through the programming. So you'll see a lot of focus on that tonight. And number three, there's a really incredible novel aspect to this project. So being able to reinvent the reservoir as an ecological and interconnected and recreational lake for the first time, something that's currently a drinking water reservoir, a kind of sterile environment. And last but not least, number four is delivering on the restorative justice for an accessible park. So all of our early community engagement, public outreach, there was just a lot of voice about the lack of access across the drive, the lack of access within the park. So really foregrounding that and trying to put forth a vision for the park, which corrects some of those historic wrongs. With that said, I'm going to hand it over to Odessa to talk a little bit about our process.
Thank you so much, Nick. So we've been really focused on maximizing participation in the public process and getting as much feedback as we can. What you see here in this image is a photo from the in-person meeting we were able to hold for the second meeting. Sadly, we weren't able to hold an in-person meeting because we weren't certain what was going to happen with the weather on Tuesday. But the goal was really for us to have representation from the communities most adjacent to the park, but also to see if we could extend that beyond the park. Uh-oh, Nick.
Yep, sorry here.
Yeah, this is definitely Odessa's section.
Yep, that's Odessa's section. Okay. All right.
There we go. So what we did track was the participation, and we used Eventbrite as a tool to help us to understand not just how many people are registering, but where they were coming from. So you may have noticed when you did the registration, we asked what your block and street number were, and that was really for us to be able to get an opportunity to identify whether we were getting representation from around the park. As well, when we noticed there were areas we weren't getting participation from, we did increase our outreach to those areas. So if you look at the first meeting, a lot of interest, 262 registrations and about 157 actual participants in that process. And then the second meeting, we had about 117 registrations and 103 in attendance for the virtual and 28 in attendance for the in-person. This map is really kind of showcasing where we did have representation. So as you can see, we did have representation from communities adjacent to the park, which was really one of our key metrics. And then we also started to see participation from communities away from the park, but people obviously who are interested in or using the park at various times. Uh-oh, somebody said he can't see any slides. Can anyone else see slides? Yes, I see a thumb. I see a thumb. Okay, so I'm not sure. Well, let's see whether we can troubleshoot with that.
The slides are up. It's at problems at their end.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I apologize that you're not able to see the slides. So I think this now shifts to you, Nick, overall design.
This is actually going to Claire.
Claire.
Me. Hi, everybody. So I'm Claire Aubrey. I'm also co-founder at Unknown Studio, local landscape architecture and urban design firm. I'm going to talk a little bit about the overall design and how we're getting to this comprehensive vision plan, which is really the first step in this marathon that Nick described. So what you see on the image right now is really where we started about 10 months ago when we started the visioning process. This is the current, more or less the current look of the lake. As you know, it's going to be converted from a potable water reservoir, and the water is going into the tanks, and that gives us this incredible opportunity to reimagine the basin. There are no natural lakes in Maryland. Every lake that you all know and love, like Loch Raven or Deep Creek, these are all man-made features, and such is the case here at Druid Lake. So we had a major opportunity to really think creatively about what this would be, and take the gates off, take the fence off, and think about how this becomes a recreational amenity. Next slide. So back in the springtime, we started with kind of 3 distinct directions. As Nick said, all of these have some things in common in terms of the principal levels. We're trying to go really big. We're trying to really think about access, especially back into the neighborhoods. It's no point making some amazing new amenity and destination here at the lake if you can't get there. So that's key to all of these. We were thinking about delivering beautiful ecosystems and wonderful places to be, thinking about different kinds of programming, and then also thinking about historic character. So all three scenarios that we furthered back in the springtime really brought forth different aspects of these different combinations. Next slide. So we got some feedback from the public and probably many of you. Thank you for responding on the overall design. What was interesting here was that there wasn't really a clear winner in terms of a particular framework. There was a slight preference for the island scheme, but overall, no significant difference in which scheme folks preferred. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Next slide. So here is where we are, the Druid Lake Vision Plan. I'm just going to highlight a few things on this slide. You'll see a little dashed U shape, sort of horseshoe in red. That's the dam that holds this entire artificial lake up. So when you're driving by on the JFX, you see that giant slope of grass with the daffodils on it. That's an artificial dam holding up the lake. We were very light touch on that side of the lake itself. So really you see pathways and some light planting. And really where the heart of the project is on the western side, and also thinking about how we link the lake back to the neighborhood, to Reservoir Hill, to Druid Park Lake Drive, and thinking about pedestrian and wheeled access, all mobility access from the lake back into the neighborhood and back into the city. So some of the big moves you see here, we're looking at daylighting a stream all the way back up to the boat lake at the zoo. We're looking at rethinking the territory around the tanks. So those tanks are a really important feature, of course. They're going to contain our drinking water in the future. And so we have these sort of rolling lawns on top of those tanks. You see the kind of two big black boxes in the center. We're starting to kind of develop a spine of recreational destinations on the north shore of the lake. So boathouse, swimming, outdoor education, a cafe, probably with kind of incubator pop-up kind of programming. And then you see all this shoreline is reimagined. So if you use the lake a lot now, you know that there's a big fence around it, some phragmites, and down goes the water. Now there's an ability and an idea that we can really get down into the lake, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Next slide, please. Here's another view. You see in the foreground a reimagined Druid Park Lake Drive. There is a parallel planning process going on with this, which Nick mentioned at the beginning, and we'll show you at the end. We encourage all of you next week to go to DOT's public meeting on the drive itself. There's a bit of an overlap in the projects. This drive actually sits within the park. So it's not a road in the way that other roads are. This right-of-way sits within the Druid Hill Park itself. So it really belongs to the park. And in some of our collaborative efforts and thinking about that, we really believe that it needs to have a park-like character and a park-like feel, very unlike the freeway that many of you know today, much safer and more pleasant and green. You also see in the foreground the idea of a fishing pier, a chain of islands, the ability to boat, swim, and get out over the water. And the entire western side of this vision plan is really tying back into the historic character of Druid Hill, which was designed in the picturesque style in the 19th century. Big, beautiful groves of oaks, creeks, historically springs and streams crisscross this site. So really kind of tying into the historic character and the naturalistic character of this site as a designed place for recreation. Next slide. Just a look going back, one of the amazing things about the lake is that it's very different on the west side and the east side in the vision plan. So the west side ties to that kind of romantic, picturesque idea of the groves and the clearings and the meandering paths and beautiful chains of islands. And the east side is that big sublime view that you've all been to, where you stand over the city and you see the whole city before you. Big open lakes. That stays more the same as what it is today. And then you see a much greener kind of green boulevard of Druid Park Lake Drive in the foreground here. Next slide. Last but not least, here's a view just looking the other way. So you see some of those same features and then see a really exciting aspect, which is the daylit stream of the valley. If you know the area where there's a grove of pine trees behind the Christopher Columbus statue and it's always wet, that's because that's a natural stream channel that has been culverted and piped. And so we're looking at an approach where we bring that stream and reconnect it to the lake and take advantage of the nutrients flowing into the lake to make this more of a living water body versus a potable chlorinated reservoir as it is today. So that's a bit of a summary of where we are with the overall landscape design. What we did hear a lot about from the public, and thank you for all who participated, is about program. And it's really important that we develop this design not as a build it and they will come place, but as a place that is active and full of activities, inviting. It's for all users. Just some images here, both in film and in history. This is a place that is beloved and actively used all the time. Even in the kind of noisiest construction site you can find, it is just full of people enjoying the park. So that will continue. And if you go to the next slide, you can see the overlay of what will be added to this site with the completion of the vision plan. So these are some of the different elements and features that we heard about from the public. Ecological planting and shade trees being really high on the list, water activities being high on the list, and then places to linger, art, food and beverage, play, pavilions, and fishing piers down the line. Go to the next slide. You can see sort of how this ecological overlay starts taking shape on the lake. Again, you see how it has a kind of different character on the west side versus the east side. Because the east side does have that constraint of the dam. We're not planting deep-rooted trees or anything over there, but we're testing the idea of some floating wetlands, thinking about the idea of that dam. Instead of just daffodils once a year, what if the entire slope was just covered with meadow planting, beautiful pollinator zone, and just kind of a billboard of Druid Hill Park as you go down 83. Next slide. So here's some renderings hot off the presses from our studio, just starting to take a look at what this could feel like. So here we're sitting on an island in the middle of Druid Lake. This is a completely man-made, created island, and we've been really careful to look at where do we have places that are really inviting for people and where are places that are softer and more reserved for the ecology. So we always have hard, durable, rocky edges when we're inviting people to get down. And you can see in the midground here, the boathouse beyond. Next slide. You can see on this one what that living shoreline looks like. Right now, it's mostly Phragmites, which most of you know is an invasive species. So there'll be an effort to remove the non-native and invasive species and establish a woodland native living shoreline. Next slide. This shows a look back over the lake, the idea of just having this kind of riot of color, beautiful perennials and meadow grasses on the slope itself, and then testing out the idea of some floating wetlands on the east side. So you can imagine if you bring your kayak all the way over here, you could meander your way through these floating wetlands. The next slide shows on the other end that idea of daylighting a stream valley all the way up the corridor that just hugs the northern tank. And it also gives us a topographic opportunity, meaning a change in elevation. So because the stream valley is going to go down, if you go on the next slide, you get this really great opportunity for kind of a prospect, this moment that you can kind of see out over the water, look back up the stream. On the next slide, you see also the same idea on the islands. So the idea of kind of expanding the use and the experience of the place by having multiple viewpoints and bridges and places to go under and over is a big part of the design. Moving to the east, I'm just going to talk a little bit about some programs. There was a lot of support both from the public and from Rec and Parks for an outdoor education building, so a place that's really designated to education and expanding the learning opportunities in this 800-acre park. On the next slide, you can see it. So one is here without the trees, so you can kind of see its character, and the next one is more of how it would really look and feel, sitting just on the north side of the lake. And then to the west, this next slide is the Cove. This is a newly created area where we've really kind of carved out on the north shore and looking to create an incredible lakefront amenity where you can boat, you can swim. This was a really interesting part early in the process. We weren't really sure if anybody would want to swim in this lake. It's, you know, this isn't the Midwest. We don't have lakes like this in the middle of our cities, but it was super popular. So we sort of started elaborating on this idea of a kind of designated swim area, and then you have a kayak and paddle boat and canoe rental opportunity on the other side. And here you get on the next slide a look at that. So lots of amazing opportunities for people to learn boating skills, just to go out on a paddle boat, dragon boat racing, places to kind of visualize this and see everybody moving around, people watching people. You know, parks are about being together, being alone together, all of the above, and about really strengthening our communities and as parks as places for wellness and well-being. So this is really starting to tick a lot of those boxes through all these programs. Send it back over to Nick and talk a little bit more about community.
I just don't know, Nick, do you realize that you're on mute?
Nick, you're muted.
That's the new, are you here now? Can you hear me now? Nope. There you go.
Okay. All right. I don't know how that happened. Thanks for bearing with me here. Okay. Yeah, so am I sharing the screen? And can you all hear me?
Yes and yes.
Okay. Sorry, this is, I will be back in 2 seconds here.
While we're waiting, we will, there are some questions or comments here. So just while Nick is pulling his screen up, we've seen that comment that it looks really amazing, very exciting. We see a couple people who said that they're excited. Now we just need to figure out how to get it funded and built. All right, we all agree with that. We have a question, Claire. How did the stream valley engage with the lake? Into or under?
Yeah.
And then now with the tanks, is it under, and does it terminate in the Jones Falls?
I can speak to that as typing a message, but I can be more articulate with voice. So the park, a lot of the stormwater, a lot of the natural springs, and a lot of the natural stormwater flow has over the years been culverted, meaning it's under the ground and storm pipes, and it's the same with that valley. So it's a natural valley. The stormwater is piped, and currently always wet, but still piped, and then outfalls to the lake. So in the future, it will go around the tanks, and then we'll daylight that stream. So we want to bring it from a culverted situation to ground level, and it will daylight and then go into the reservoir. And that's important. We want to be bringing nutrients into the reservoir. So bringing carbon, bringing all sorts of nutrients and carbon load to make it a living water body. Nick, what did I forget?
I think that's it. And I guess that it will grow kind of incrementally over time is sort of how we've envisioned it and how biohabitats has sort of thought of it. And yeah, that if we can deliver this first leg of it near the lake, while simultaneously planning for like the integration of the entire watershed upstream, then yeah, we really have the flexibility to kind of use it to grow the ecosystem of the lake itself. Okay, well, hopefully I'm back and you all can hear me, and we just proceed smoothly from now on. So thinking about the activity, we had some community input on this. I mean, it's always one of the fascinating things about this park is it existed before the neighborhoods that surround it, and the neighborhoods grew up around it. You know, originally it was sort of accessed by streetcars and carriages and sort of on the perimeter of the city. And now it's really in the center of Baltimore and has an opportunity to not only serve the surrounding neighborhoods, but also be a citywide destination, a regional destination. So thinking about some of the activity here, we had in our previous poll, one of our earlier polls, kind of asked questions about what you would like to see added to Druid Hill Lake. And some of the top priorities in this were gathering places, so building on those events venues, the food and beverage programs, and the lake swimming, as Claire pointed out in another one of our similar questions, became an exciting priority. Some of the things that didn't rank as high were like fishing and skating and some other play spaces, other activities around the lake. The biking circuit has always been quite high, or the pedestrian promenade around the lake. One of the sort of linchpins to the entertainment and events programming is the amphitheater. So here we really look to build on the DPW what's currently designed in the DPW tanks landscape and adding a structure over it so we can provide some shade and some rain protection. We're looking here to sort of create a kind of quiet structure, which is elevated, allows those long views across the water. We really see the lake's edge as being well lit, safe, and you know, just being able to be here and see music and performances nestled in these hills with the view of the city beyond is super unique and successful now. And through these through these additions of program will be even better. We've seen a couple images of the swimming area. This we've really seen, you know, on the North Shore, as Claire highlighted, sort of part of this kind of string of pearls of active programs extending from the tennis courts and the basketball courts and the all along the northern shore, and sort of integrated with the lakefront pathway and the promenade, like really being an active hub. Here we're looking at about a third of an acre, I believe, for the actual swimming area, adjacent to a boat launch and dock that would serve the boat programs. As well as on the lower level of this building, there's a chance for not only to accommodate the locker rooms for the swimming area, but then also boat storage, but to have classroom space so that this can become an educational environment as well. Here's a view of the swimming area looking east. You kind of get a sense of the scale of it. And as Claire pointed out, some of the islands which are built on are planned, we're thinking about for the west side of the lake to actually reuse, we hope, some of the existing fill, which would otherwise be shipped off-site with the as the tank landscape construction comes to a close. There's a huge cofferdam there, so the islands have that going for them as well. The cafe and boathouse, I mean, we see this as a simple, elegant structure, something that really complements historic architecture around the lake. There's this incredible legacy of the buildings were designed by George Frederick and John Latrobe, and try to do something which is kind of compatible with that. We see it as like a generous kind of front porch with easy access to the water through these switchback ramps for all mobilities. And there's this great advantage, we think, of keeping all of the programs centralized. So the restaurant, the swimming, the boating, and the classroom spaces can all keep this as an active place. You know, whether it's on a weekday or on a busy holiday weekend, there's always activity and a reason to go there. The view from the cafe, this elevated porch essentially is awesome. You know, sort of being able to look back out towards the Moorish Tower and see the city beyond, as well as some of the islands and crossings and swimming below. It's one of the things we think is super promising about how the organization is starting to shape up. At this point, I want to just pivot here, connected to that, but to focus a little bit more specifically on the circulation and aspect piece. We love this image. I think it's from the 1870s. It shows all the sort of modalities of movement around the lake, you know, with the pedestrians looking out over the lake, with the pedestrians looking out over the city, and then the carriages kind of weaving through the middle here. You know, there's a couple things here too that are also super nice and for us to have been inspiring for us to think about, but that's the water is very close and accessible to the promenade. The things we're trying to pull that off on the west side of the lake, and there's just a low fence kind of separating you from the water, unlike some of the walls that exist there today. So in one of the questions in terms of how you circulate throughout the park that we posed in the last community meeting was, we had three different concepts. And two of them really weaved the circulation more towards the Utah and Madison gates. That was the Groves and Clearings and the Perched Wetlands scheme. Then we had another one which went up the Spring Valley itself, kind of gesturing more towards the zoo. There wasn't a really strong preference here. I'm sort of looking at the light blue version of this, which is the first ranked choices. You can see that the groves and clearings and islands, which are the ones that dip towards the Madison, Utah gates on the south, had a higher preference than the Spring Valley scheme. So we took that in the design and we really used we used it to create strong connections across the drive. Here you can see in red, there's the Lakefront Promenade, which is connected to, in orange here, the Jones Falls Trail in a couple different locations. And there's a series of bump outs along, most of these pathways that are shown in blue. So there's a chance to get off the trail. There's a chance to have, benches for seating and taking the views. As Claire mentioned, that there's the Druid Park Lake Drive itself. We are advocating for as many crossings as we can get, and safe, pedestrian-friendly crossings. We've got 5 here that we're advocating for, going all the way from Fulton down to Brookfield, where it's easy to do so from a grade standpoint. Today, there's essentially 2, and they're super dangerous and kind of insane to wait around for the lights. And if you don't move fast enough, the lights will turn. So really trying to restore that. And also restoring Madison and Utah as actual gateways. These were the Madison Arch used to really feel like the edge of the park, within the park. The gateway at Utah similarly was a dignified entrance to the park, and trying to bring that back. We're also looking at 2 future crossings here on the east, on the dam end, bringing one connection in the future down to the Mountain Royal Terrace, and another one up to the north, where we can get a faster way of kind of getting up on the promenade, and one that sort of brings you through that the grove of the forested hillside on above the dam on the east side. So what that looks like, we have a series of typologies, different kinds of paths that weave around the lake. The 12-foot path here, with a couple different edge conditions, and sort of working in boulders and natural features to provide some of the vehicular protection to the tanks themselves, and to create edges to the shoreline. With these 12-foot mixed-use pathways, or we have like the 20-foot wide is on the bottom. That's what we're designing currently as the promenade itself, which is has a mixed-use bike, or a cycling side basically, and a pedestrian side. As mentioned, with some areas to kind of pull off for safety. We just wanted to really focus in here on some of the important historical aspects of this, and we've sort of touched on this. This was a drawing that was done by Tool on our team, the transportation engineers, and they looked at the historic crossings, easy pedestrian-friendly crossings into the park at 1927, and then in 1964, after the JFX and Druid Park Lake Drive were turned into these multi-lane roads, and it went from 18 to 5. And then if we zoomed into our project site, there's really just 2, and they're super dangerous. So trying to correct that historic wrong that was done to the residents to the south. These are roads that were really designed to serve white commuters at the protest of the residents. So trying to bring that back, it's left us with this condition of the existing Druid Park Lake Drive here, with massive multi-lane roads going in both directions, very little opportunities for trees and pedestrian refuge, as you're crossing that. So we are, as Claire mentioned, have been in conversation with the DOT team, and I think one of the things it's fair to say that we're both on the same page that the roadway should have a park-like character, and it should be as narrow as possible. and should prioritize the needs of all residents, including bikes and pedestrians and other modalities. So this is just one of our rendition of this, as we're thinking about what would be appropriate for the park. Something with the tree-lined alley, something green, shaded, that blends with the park. Here you can see on the left of the image is the Big Jump, this 14-foot wide mixed-use pathway that serves as a critical link for residents here to get over the Jones Falls, over the JFX, to neighborhoods to the east, and then on the right image here, that's the promenade. So we're showing here like a 26-foot wide pathway at this location with the views to the lake to the right, as well as a generous sidewalk like immediately next to the drive itself, and trying to get that road down to just one lane in each direction. Here's another view. This is kind of flipped around, looking the other direction. You can see the Big Jump on the far right, that 2-lane road, one in each direction in the center, and then views of the promenade on the far left here. But really trying to bring this shaded alley of trees, something that, sort of naturally vehicles will be moving at slower, safer speeds, easier opportunities for pedestrians to cross and enter the park. One of our views here that we think is a super important view. You can see here the Utah columns that are currently kind of buried in a sidewalk. Having those really be prominent part of the entry to the park. So bringing back some of those picturesque long views that organize much of the original park design, using that to kind of look across these tank landscapes. So we're really excited by these initial concept designs and the role that circulation and access needs to play in the park. With that said, I'm going to hand it over to Claire, who's going to talk us through how we anticipate getting there through project phasing and priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. So as Nick said at the very beginning, this is a really large multi-phase project. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and big civic park projects like this are typically done in phases. We already sort of know what our pre-phase is, which is the completion of the tanks. And one of the things that we're actively working on with DPW and DOT on the drive side is making sure we can coordinate and come to a kind of shared finish line so that we're not digging things up again to put back in some of these vision plan efforts. We know everyone is sick to death of construction and incomplete loops. So we're working with the agencies on that. Here's what you see right now, just to look over the tanks in process. They're currently scheduled, the latest DPW is probably the tanks to finish next summer, sometime end of next summer. So if you go to the next slide, what we're really focused on then is what are we delivering as early phase and phase 1 for the park? And that is part of our survey tonight. So I want everybody to think about that. What would you like to do and see here first? When we looked at the kind of overall programming and facilities implementation, this is the ranking in terms of what people wanted to see first. It's no surprise that people want their loop back. There's nothing more frustrating than the kind of dead-endedness of the loop right now. So it's a really mission critical to restore walking, running, and biking, not only period, but in loops, and that connects to everything. So connects to the Jones Falls Trail, connects to the overall loop, connects back to the neighborhood safely. Then just subsequent from there, the next biggest one was swimming. So we can't swim in the reservoir until it's no longer a reservoir. So that puts us behind DPW's schedule sometime next summer. It'll likely be behind that, but that is a really high priority, actually getting into the lake, and that's tremendously exciting. Everything from there is a little more evenly split. Next slide. So we've started thinking about what happens first. We know that these planning projects are long. People get planning fatigue. So we've been talking about a kind of phase 0, an idea of early activation. And these could be projects that are really to keep the community involved. Everybody who's attending tonight, who knows someone who hasn't been involved, we're looking forward into a phase of work where we get a little bit more creative and hands-on and get people out in the park. enjoying the space. So the idea of pop-up programming, temporary art installation, and then once we can use the water, thinking about boating and water events, meadow planting on the east side. That's something I mentioned earlier. The idea of planting that huge slope with just a riot of color. It could be seasonal. It could be something that's different every year. It could be part of a kind of public art or public education event, thinking about that planting. The little red dots in the north part of the lake here, if you go to the next slide, this is just a sort of conceptual idea at the moment, but we like the idea of a kind of custom boat for Baltimore. So if you've been to Boston, you know, they have the swan boats at Echo Park. They have these kind of lit up swan boats, and there's other kind of ideas from all over the country. So what if there was a sort of public art collaboration or something with the local schools to think about what the custom paddle boat or custom canoe would be for Druid Lake? We think that'd be really fun. And then on the left, just some great reference images of other kind of big, beautiful planting slopes, which could happen first. Next slide. So then we get into the kind of meat of phase one. Seeing a little lag here. Are you guys seeing phase one? Not yet. Nick, are we stuck?
Let me
Just hear Nick say,
She can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
There
I'm just going to advance it and back.
There we go.
Good. So when we think about phase one, there's a lot of kind of technical sequencing and constructability conversations that go on behind this. But kind of simply put, the things that we want to deliver in phase one, the highest priorities are getting in the water, and then also being really smart about how we restore a series of loops and connective pathways and trail systems so people can use this entire space. There's a little bit more work to be done and a little bit beyond the scope of what we think will happen in phase one to really complete the entire western shoreline. But we're really focused on connectivity and safe access back to Swan Drive, around the kind of new lawn landscapes themselves and around the lake. And then what you see in the center here is the idea of getting the islands built as part of the first phase, getting the landscape on those islands established, and then doing the access point at what we're calling the cove, which is that kind of curve in the North Shore, getting boats, getting swimming, getting those programs going as part of our phase one. Next slide. So this is just a look at what that would be. We sort of grade out the building. The building itself might be a future phase, and there could be a kind of pop-up sort of park idea here in the meantime, but still the ability to rent boats, to have swimming lessons. Really, people want to get in the water, as do I, and start using the water for recreational use. And so then we can think about a later phase for the permanent building. Make sure we get our infrastructure in correctly, our grading, and get our water access in is the very first priority. Next slide. So that is it from us for design. I know we've talked a lot. What we're looking for on the survey, which I think is in the chat, we'll probably go in there again. There's a link to the survey that's going to help us understand, do we have this kind of early phase right? We're also looking generally about how did you hear about this meeting? We are always looking to grow the constituency and team of voices in support of this project. It's a big project. It's a big project for any city. It's a big project for Baltimore. And the more voices that are in support and critiquing and making it better, then the stronger it will be. So it's really going to be an all hands on deck, all agency, kind of all city effort to get this project built. Thank you. I think I'm sending it over to Odessa now.
Yes. So thank you, Claire and Nick, for kind of walking us through all of the ideas that have been moved from the preliminary ideas through getting some feedback on some of our original concepts into the space where we are now. As Claire mentioned, we do have a feedback survey here. In the chat, we have provided a link that one can click on, and that's a SurveyMonkey link to a series of questions. You can also use the QR code you see here to take the same survey. So either the QR code or the link will take you to that location. Excuse me. I see that there are a lot of comments in the chat, so we're trying to respond as best we can. just wanted to remind everyone or kind of point out that one of the things that as a team that we were doing was trying to have both in-person and virtual meetings to try to expand the amount of participation that we have, but also remembering that during a pandemic, it kind of limited some of the things that we had initially planned to do in terms of engagement. So we're using the best strategies that we can at the moment. And so that's why we want everyone to not only take the survey, but also to forward the survey along. And we will be sharing a link to this recording so that if you have anyone, to people who registered, so if there's anyone that is that you think would be interested in seeing the information, this would be a great way for us to continue to share it with others.
Odessa, is it possible to put a link to just the slide deck somewhere too for people who don't want to watch the whole meeting?
Yes, I believe on the website.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll make sure that gets posted.
We'll do both, Claire.
Great.
Excellent. So Claire and Nick, there were a couple of questions that I did think we should, that were asked about funding. There was a question about funding and there was a question about trees, that the presentation shows already mature trees. And the question was, how long did we think they would take to actually mature? I think that's a very important question. And then about where we are in the funding process. I think both of those, a lot of people had the same question. So finding a way to provide an answer would be excellent.
Sure. Which one do you want to take, Nick? Divide and conquer.
I guess I could take the fundraising question. Very great question. We've actually done quite a bit of work on that aspect of it. And we didn't share all of that today. You know, we do, and I know we probably have Adam and Larissa and Valerie from the BCRP team here. We have some initial Rec and Parks budget for continued design for the first phases. We see this with the whole sort of go big approach to this project, that we approached it from the beginning, understanding that it is going to take some additional funding from outside the city. So we're going to be looking for state and federal dollars, infrastructure grants, a wide variety, a suite of funding options for this project. And in order to pull it off, we think that the park is going to have to partner with a non-for-profit partner, and it's going to take all hands to get this done. You know, it's complicated and it involves a lot of work and coalitions across the city to make it work, but it's not unprecedented, and we've seen it done. There's a lot of really great references in other parks across the city, or excuse me, other parks across the country of successful urban landscapes like this that have really channeled a kind of a diverse range of funding to realize the project through a multi-phase construction process. I don't know if Claire, if you have anything else to add to that. I mean,
I'll just say it's early days. It's a vision plan, so we don't know the precise dollars and cents, but it's a double-digit $1 million project to be sure. The tanks project is a triple. I don't know if I'm doing my numbers right. Triple millions. The tank is a triple millions project. This project is a double-digit millions. So anyway, not as much as the tanks, which of course is a huge infrastructural project. It's a little premature to give cost, but part of the phasing is to kind of break it down into feasible chunks that will still meet the desires and activation goals. Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. We have a kind of sense of cost, but we're currently in the process of furthering design so that we can get more precise on that, and then looking for where the dollars, where we can access the dollars. As a lot of you know, there's Of course, as we speak, a lot of conversation about infrastructure money. A lot of these projects also look at the philanthropic center. It's bigger than a typical parks project, to be sure. I can speak to the trees too, and happy to follow up on money more if you want to talk more about money. But as far as trees go, it's really a site-specific question. So the renderings show a kind of maybe 20-year future, I would say, something like that. It depends where we're planting. So in some of those shoreline areas where we're really doing riparian lakefront freshwater planting, the plants may be a little happier if we put them in small, so whips or saplings, and similarly in the riparian area. And then, oh, Nick, we lost the screen.
Yeah, I'm gonna, if it's okay, just end the share here if I can.
We have that last slide with the drive. That was the only thing.
Okay.
Drive plan. I was just going to add, so we will be putting in much larger specimen trees at higher caliper at the outset, just to ensure that we have as much shade as we can get as soon as we can get it. The park is, of course, renowned for its oak trees, so we want to ensure we continue that canopy. So are there any other questions that you want to point us to, or other folks want to put in the chat?
Yeah, so the other question is about surveys, feedback, connecting with the local communities. We've talked a lot about it on the prior two meetings, so we didn't spend as much time talking about our efforts to communicate with the public about the project. We've used a lot of different tools, and really the pandemic affected our ability to do some of the in-person engagement that we had intended. That we know can increase participation. So one of the things we did was put information in the parks and in the rec centers, simply because actually approaching people is a little bit less inviting in the current environment. And then mailing can become a bit cost prohibitive to be able to mail to all of the communities adjacent to the park. So we were looking for strategies that would allow us best to communicate with the largest group of people. We were actually, what you wouldn't see kind of behind the scenes is our communication directly with the leaders of neighboring organizations, and then offering those organizations. We were actually printing out copies of materials so that people could distribute them. But it's really quite difficult to reach such a large number of people. One of the things Claire has said to me over the course of this project so far is Druid Lake and Druid Park is beloved, which means that the reach of it is way beyond just the communities adjacent to it. So finding a way to reach all of the people that come to the park is very tricky. We're still looking for additional support there and any other ideas. So we welcome that feedback. And that was one of the things I was trying to communicate in the chat. We've asked the local elected officials who have really large email lists to share information through them. And like I mentioned also, we're posting information physically in the parks. And we've had a couple of people indicate that that's how they've been brought into the process. But it's a continuing challenge to get people excited, activated, and interested. And so we continue to look for additional strategies to support making sure we get as much feedback as we can.
So on the topic of engagement, if we go to the next slide, maybe we just want to put this in the chat. But if you go to the next slide, Nick, we just wanted to make sure everyone here is aware. We're promoting our adjacent and collaborating agencies workshops as well. So next Thursday, there's a meeting hosted by DOT, which is looking in more detail at the entire Druid Park Lake Drive corridor. So on this project, as you notice, we're mostly focusing on the area just around the lake. So we're sort of seeing Reservoir Hill and just that corner of Madison and McCullough because they're most proximal to the lake. But next Thursday, if you're interested in the entire corridor and some of the options in the entire corridor, please go attend the DOT meeting 6:30 to 7:30 next week. And there's some information we can put in the chat about this as well. So the projects are intricately tied together, and it's really important that the community weighs in on both. We found so far that the feedback that we're getting tends to be also about their project. So we have to, they're tangled up, and that's important, and they should be, because the road is in the park. So we want to make sure that road does right by the park.
Yeah, and Claire, I wanted to make sure you also mentioned that we've been coordinating directly with DPW as well because of their tank project. So the coordination between the Department of Public Works, Department of Transportation, and Department of Rec and Parks has been ongoing. All of us are promoting each other's activities in an attempt to make sure that the communities know about all three projects and kind of the next steps happening. So we'll continue to do that in the next phases of the project to ensure that we have some collaboration. We know that access is probably the #1 priority, no matter which project anyone talks about. And so we're doing a lot of work to make sure that we all hear concerns from each other and reflect them appropriately in our projects.
I think that's pretty much our show tonight. Elsa, thank you for just putting the survey again in the chat. So the survey that Elsa's sending out gives us really important data, such as which neighborhood you live in, so that we understand who we're missing, who we're hearing from, and who we're not hearing from. We're always endeavoring to make that better. So please fill that out in the survey. It's not to direct market to you, it's simply to find out our reach. And then there's some important questions in there about how do we really right size phase 1? What do you want to see first? We're actively defining what the phase 1 design scope is going to be, which is going to lead to the first phase of the project. So if you go one more slide, just to recap, we're just finishing up the vision plan here. It's really kind of the first 10% of the process, and then we're going to move into design later this year and in the new year on phase 1, and then we hope moving into construction in partnership with these coordinating projects at the tanks and the drive. So that, I think, is it for us. Odessa, any closing words, any final homework for us?
I think our homework remains for everyone to continue to share information about this project with all of your neighbors and friends. And we will continue to do the work of coming up with a vision for Druid Lake that will hopefully meet the needs and desires of the community that's local and citywide. So thank you all so much for participating. We will, as we said, post links so that you have access to this information and the registrants will receive it. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you all. Thanks for coming.